Nintendo's Palworld also is getting surprisingly officially updated. I'm going to be completely honest with you here for a few seconds. People grossly do not understand the lawsuit between Nintendo and Palworld. So I'll fill in what the actual lawsuit was about. People are misconstruing it as being a copyright lawsuit. It is not. It is a patent lawsuit. The reason why this is a very big, there's a very big divide between what that is and what that means. There's a very big divide. We'll get into why that's quite an interesting change, what that actually means that's different. Patent lawsuits are generally considered to be they're more about, from what I understand, patent lawsuits are saying, you copied this mechanic, therefore stop doing what you're doing because you copied our work. Now, I find this to be one of the dumbest lawsuits I've ever heard of. Let me just get pictures of what the patents are. This is basically what Nintendo are saying Palworld is infringing on. This idea of capturing pals, but not necessarily the idea of capturing monsters. If that was the case, they would have lawsuits in Digimon. And I think this is one of the dumbest ideas I've ever heard of. You are patenting game mechanics. It's like if somebody has a patent for, say, the reload mechanic in anything, if you had a reload mechanic, you theoretically would be able to make it so that no other third-person shooter could exist. That is the problem with patenting things like mechanics. So this is basically what they are infringing on, patent ideas. These are things that Nintendo have put forward in the Japanese patent office. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, this is the mechanic. The idea is simple. That's just rude. So this is what the idea for this is. You have the idea, Nintendo's patent is you jump and you have Pokemon here. You have your Pokemon over here and you summon out the Pokemon mid-flight and you fly across the river. Why this? Now, the reason why this was a problem was there was a PAL called Glide Claw. You had the PAL out. Instead of having a glider in your inventory, you had the PAL. And that was the idea of the Glide Claw. You got rid of a glider from your inventory. In exchange, you put it on your PAL team and you could glide at any time. And it was actually a really interesting mechanic. It also gave you the opportunity to shoot whilst you were gliding too, which was really good mobility in a game where you're shooting lots of bits and bobs. Gave you mobility, and it was an interesting mechanic. Apparently, Nintendo claimed it as a patented mechanic, which doesn't make that much sense. Again, that's patenting things like roguelife. You can't make a roguelife? You're gonna get rid of all gliders because of this? But what is interesting about this entire thing is I swear I've seen this particular animation before. And the reason I recognize this particular animation is because of Nier Automatum. There is a legit mechanic in Nier Automatum that is word for word, bar for bar, note for note, the exact same idea and concept. We see this, and Square Enix is a Japanese company. What the heck this lawsuit's even about at this point? Because if you're gonna, this is almost the exact same idea concept to the patent. I don't understand where the idea between the lawsuit actually makes any sense now, because essentially, if this is the same idea and concept, why is this any different to this? They are literally the same animation. And the thing about this is, Palworld was misunderstood recently. They were misunderstood on the idea of removing a game mechanic they removed this mechanic because of the lawsuit. But this wasn't necessarily because they were bending the knee to Nintendo. It was actually quite the opposite. They were actually doing it out of a good faith argument, which means theoretically, if they were infringing on this patent, well, they've removed it, so they can make an argument saying, we've removed that mechanic, why are we still getting sued? What's also really interesting is, if we look here in the AZ trailer, you notice that it plays a lot like Palworld. Look right here. You are now rolling. This is a new mechanic. Never seen in Pokemon. You can never roll in Pokemon. This sort of live action thing, completely new to Pokemon. But the rolling is very interesting. Rolling means if Palworld, a game company, wishes to patent this particular mechanic found here is actually found heavily in two franchises, Digimon and Palworld. Ever pattern this one mechanic in Japanese court, they technically have a stronger argument than Nintendo do, because technically it is a big part of Palworld that you release your Pokemon and start rolling. Because you're patterning ideas like gliding, you theoretically could pattern ideas like rolling, and that's really interesting. Apparently this is more of a bigger loss. It theoretically could be a legal thing that Palworld could do. I ain't no lawyer, but I find it really interesting that because of this lawsuit, Nintendo has technically opened themselves up to legal action. Well, not necessarily legal action. I'm going by what I've heard. Do not sue me, Nintendo. I'm just a dickhead on the internet. But no, what I'm saying here is the abstract nature of a pattern just makes it so that it opens up, like, the idea of flying, gliding on a Pokemon or a creature. Like, that's just part of fantasy. People want to glide and do all these amazing, fantastical things, and yet we now pattern them in games so that we can't do it and make the fantasy more of a reality. It's kind of just an interesting, well, no, I'm going to say it's a bogus and ridiculous lawsuit that I think is relatively stupid. I ain't a lawyer. I'm a massive fan of Palworld. I just think it's a dumb lawsuit, especially when you are doing this. So the reason why I'm bringing it up is Nintendo's finally updating its patents. Now, this is actually really good news for Palworld. This is really interesting about Palworld. So what Nintendo's lawsuit finally updates on the patents. What is interesting about the lawsuit by itself is, a few months ago, Nintendo went to Japanese patent offices and requested a modification on one of their patents within the Palworld lawsuit. This request was approved and now published. Nintendo reveals it wants to change their patents to regarding smooth switchings of riding objects, such as flying on an avian creature. I don't know. Flying on an avian creature to move to other land mounts. And this is basically, again, this is what the lawsuit's all about. It's nothing to do with copyright law, which is funny because there are a lot of people that still get that misconstrued. At the same time, I can kind of see why they would get it misconstrued, because, oh well, it does look a bit weird. Like some powers do look very similar. Like, yeah. Basically, what makes this very interesting is the phrase, oh, even when. So, according to the article by GameFly, Nintendo has surprisingly updated when the company changed the language behind one of its patents middle of one of its ongoing lawsuits. Now, from what I understand, because I'm not a lawyer, changing a patent mid-trial is only something you can do in Japan. But it's actually a good sign for Palworld, because there are two things you can do during a lawsuit that you were allowed to do to change pattern in Japanese courts. The two things are fix typos, make language less vague. And what the term even when does is make the text even more vague. The updated pattern has a new lengthy paragraph regarding character boarding different aerial characters seamlessly flying. However, what was striking most confusing is the even when statement seen at the beginning. Even when. This phrase even is rarely used regarding legal text because it's far too subjective. Even when, I actually really want to know what it is in Japanese, because people are saying this is even when is really confusing for an English speaking language. What is the Japanese perspective on the phrase even when? Even when something happens, it's just a really odd language. It's way too abstract for a patent in lawsuit. But what is good about this is because it's been changed, people are speculating that Nintendo has to broaden its perspective. The even when makes it more vague, but the entire point of changing a patent mid-lawsuit is to make it clearer. Even when. But no, very interesting lawsuit. I personally just wanted to talk about it because I've been playing a lot of Palworld. I've been enjoying Palworld. And frankly have just enjoying it. But I just wanted to know what's happening in the lawsuit, so I got myself a little educated. And unironically, I got ready pretty decently considering I'm not a lawyer. I personally think at the very least. Okay, what's next on the docket? Even when docket. We have a Pokemon story, but I don't really want to talk about it too much.